Welcome to the podcast, Llewellyn. It's great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
My money story, well, it's quite a long one, really. It's interesting. I'm going to bring my wife into it as well, because we're two very contrasting sort of backgrounds. I come from a long line of doctors, and my mum and dad were both doctors. And my wife, she grew up in quite a poor sort of family. So it's interesting how both of us, we would describe our childhood as very happy. We weren't really aware of money. There wasn't something, I think we were more interested in, because we were enjoying ourselves, the kind of happiness part of it. But she grew up in a very small kind of council house, and I grew up what they called I lived in Hertfordshire. I lived in a place called Berkhamsted, and in a place called Frisden Copse, which the house my dad bought in 1966 for 15,000, and I think it's worth a few million now.
Unbelievable.
And the funny thing is, it was a big house, and you would have thought, we would have had fantastic holidays and things, but we didn't. Even though they were on medical incomes. My dad was actually chief medical officer of hearts, beds, and bucks, and did okay. But we never went abroad. My mum sort of inherited through her parents, who were also doctors. And he was quite a famous doctor, her father. He was like a chief medical officer in Bristol. And that was in World War II, and he became honorary physician to the Queen and things. So it's all quite a big kind of thing. But there was never, because she was given like a converted farmhouse in North Wales. That was where we always went, a place called Cricket, for our holidays and things. So we never kind of had what you would imagine an exotic life of traveling to, what was in we're talking about the 70s, which would have been, Spain and all these exotic places. It was always going to a freezing cottage at Easter, or a dip in the freezing sea in the summer, and that sort of thing. And my bedroom was a very small bedroom in this massive, I think it was like a 7-bedroom house or whatever, I'll probably be corrected on that. But the thing I do remember is being situated a long way from my school friends, because we lived so far away from kind of on the suburban outskirts, that I could never meet up, with them. I was always dependent on my mum and dad to drive me, which was always a bit of a hassle. And also, and people will go, this isn't a sob story, but because I went to a private school, we only had one day off, which was a Sunday. So, and I hated sport, really hated sport. And it's very sport orientated. So you have like a Tuesday, a Thursday, and a Saturday. And it was kind of, for me, that when I did have time off, which was a Sunday, I was either cleaning cars or I was raking leaves or mowing the lawn, which my father's attitude was, you should be grateful for that, because you live in this big house, you have this privileged life, you should be kind of grateful for it, But of course, I never knew anything different, that was what I knew. And the same way with my wife. My wife, on the other hand, sometimes meals on the table would be sugar sandwiches, and she would have like an old bath, literally brought in from outside, put in front of the fireplace, But we both have happy childhoods and that kind of thing from it. And my dad was always trying to ingrain into me, you must do well at school. You've got to get your O-levels. There were O-levels in those days, not GCSEs, A-levels, and then you must go to university. And this kind of mentality came from, because my dad was a working class boy, and he was from Yeovil in Somerset, whereas my mum's family, as I said, came from quite a well-to-do kind of doctor medical family. And because of this kind of view that he had, he felt, because of the opportunities that came to him, he was a Bevan boy in the war, and the Bevan boys was because they conscripted a lot of people to go into the army. And it was Bevan, who was one of the MPs at the time, said, God, we haven't got any miners. We've sent all the miners away. We've got to get coal. So they were called the Bevan boys because they were conscripted to either go in the army or the navy or go down the mines. And my dad went down the mines. And after the war, they were given an opportunity to do exams to get into university, which was kind of an opportunity that was not granted many people. And my dad did really, really well from a working class situation. He got to go to Bristol University to discover medicine, where he met my mum. So for him, that was the only route, that he could think of, is you must do well. And he's like giving his sons the opportunity to go to a private school. And yet, with me, it was kind of, I'm just interested in music. That's all I wanted to do. When I said that they used to do a lot of sport at school,
yeah,
I used to play around with that. I would sort of say to the teachers, can I do two sports? Can I do swimming and can I do tennis? And my plan, which worked very well, is when I wasn't at tennis, they think I was doing swimming. And when I wasn't, but where was I? I was taking the afternoon off at home and I was playing the piano. And I very much kept to myself when I would be sneaking off to the music school to play music and that sort of thing. So I had friends, but I was very much focused at a very young age on wanting to do my music. And my dad became really frustrated with this because, of course, giving that background about working hard and having all these opportunities, he said to me when I was 16, he said, do you think it's fair that we pay for you to be privately educated and you're just messing around doing your music? And I said, I agree. So I left and I went to a comprehensive school for that very reason. And I think that was good because it gave me a both sort of
perspectives, yeah,
private, and that sort of thing. And from that, I still just wanted to do my music. My father, shortly after I did that, he passed away. I was only 18. He died quite young at sort of 58. And then I think my mum felt kind of what had happened to me at such a young age. She really wanted to sort of make me happy, rather than force me to go and do something I didn't want to do. And I think she wanted me around as well. She was quite lonely. So she encouraged me with my music. And I inherited, this is again money, I inherited money from when my dad, there was an orphan's pension, which I had to stay in education to still get that pension. Mm-hmm. But I inherited quite a bit of money from my dad as well, which I then went and spent, this is kind of in the early 80s, on electronic equipment, which in those days was very, very expensive. And around about that time, I got a record deal with a local record company. And I suppose this is the thing where I didn't put a value on what was really going on in my life at that time. There was suddenly, this wonderful opportunities that I could have all this equipment that most people wouldn't have, and I was able to express myself musically and do that. And then this record company, they would drive. I didn't drive initially. I failed my driving test 3 times before I got it.
Mine twice.
Oh, well, there you go. Better than me.
Yes.
But I was being taken to these recording studios in London by their drivers. And in these studios, there were these expensive machines called a Lindrum at those times, which would sound like real sampled drums. And they would deliver these to the studios. Sometimes we were waiting around for this thing to come while the clock was ticking. But they looked after me so well. But it was one of these studios, which was in Luton, actually. I can't remember the name of the studio. But the manager there gave me some really, really bad advice. He said to me, don't sign any more deals with this local company. You're good enough to get signed to a major like Virgin. And he said, I used to do demos for Elton John when he started off. So, of course, a young man at about sort of 17, 18 years of age, my head's like, I'm going to be this pop star. It's because of everything that just sort of happened before me. I presumed that. And so instead of staying with this wonderful local company that had supported me and developing my skills over the next few years, I refused to do any more with them, sort of, hoping I was going to get signed to Virgin Records, And that really then was kind of where my path changed to the reality, I think, with money, that I'm going to have to get a job at some point, and if I can't get a record deal, which I was struggling with, I got some big management. I was managed by, there was an artist in the 80s called Howard Jones.
Oh, I love Howard Jones, yeah.
Well, I was managed by David Stocks. He was a lovely guy, his manager. And David said to me, you know, we're going to get you working with Howard. We're going to do some recordings, which of course, having Howard produce them and this sort of thing, that was a great leg up for me. And Howard was a big hero of mine. But for one reason or another, I don't think Howard actually was that excited about working with me. And so that diffused that whole kind of, you know, relationship with David managing me. And then I got managed by another company called Smallwood and Taylor, who they were managing, I think, Iron Maiden at the time. And we did a big showcase up at the Nomis Studios, which is owned by Simon Fuller. And Nomis is Simon backwards. And we did a showcase for record companies, CBS and EMI, and that, like Spandau Ballet were recording in the next studio. It's really exciting, you know. And we went from Friday doing all these performance showcases to having a publishing company there, the management company that signed us, and CBS were going to sign us. And the lady from CBS was coming down to sort of meet us, and she did later on. And she didn't really click with us. She didn't think that we had the potential. And as of Monday morning, dropped. We had our management dropped us. That was it. You know.
How fickle.
Yeah, we went from hero to zero. Yeah. And then, of course, I'm in this situation again where I'm thinking, God, you know, I've presented all my music. I have to start from scratch again. And it's like that kind of wake-up call, and it was quite a shock. And I think I found the frustration with the music industry that I'd just given and put so much into it. My soul was into the music, and to be let down on that massive scale was quite difficult. And I met my wife around about that time, and I think I just decided, you know what, I'm going to focus my energy into a relationship, because I'd never had serious relationships, because I just put all my heart soul into
your music. Yeah.
And my mum was brilliant. She sort of said, well, if you're going to get, if you're serious about this girl, you better get a job, you know. So she got the papers out, you know, and I had some O levels, and I had A level, I think, in art and drama. That's quite arty, isn't it? And really, she was just great. She was supporting me to go and get this job, and I went selling advertising space, and I then got a mortgage. And yeah, I started to realize how tough it was, you know. And my wife, she had a job, but the day that we moved in, she was made redundant. So she didn't have the income coming in, you know. And she did get another job, but I was always this person that I liked to stay up really late at night. And I found that our relationship was that she was just so tired and exhausted. We weren't having a life together. So I did say to her that, just, you know, you need to give up work. And she was like, well, how are we going to cope? I went, well, we'll find a way somehow of doing it. But we hit this time, which was very financially hard. I remember there was a little sort of like corner shop that we'd go to. We would get rice, and we'd open a tin of, I don't know, some mincemeat or something that we'd have in it. But I don't remember it being terrible, but we had, you know, we struggled. And I remember not wanting to let my mum know that we were kind of struggling, you know, and this sort of thing. But I still remember us being happy. We even got a dog, and no, it was this. And even then, my wife was still, you know, I'm sure you're gonna do some living out of, you know, of music of some sort. Because my main priority was not to be like a pop star. It was just to do my music and be at home, really, you know. And I do remember, money-wise, that having nothing, literally nothing in the bank. And I remember writing these checks. And at the, I think it was at the Nationwide, there was somebody called Abby Golding. And every time that your check bounced, you get charged, not only would the money not go through, you get charged £20.
Holy. Yeah.
So I remember one morning, I think it was a bank holiday or something, or it can't have been a bank holiday because we got post, but it must have been the weekend of the bank holiday. And we got 3 letters. They were all from Abby Golding, you know, and that's like, they've all bounced, and there's £60, which in those days was the equivalent of £600. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, just what are we going to do? And we discovered credit cards. And so we thought, well, this is really good. We can sort of like live off credit cards. We went down that slippery slope of building up, you know, that. And it was around about that time that my sister, who was a massager, and she said to me, do you know what? I have these cassette tapes that when I'm doing massage of this kind of music in the background. Have a listen to it. She gave me one of these cassette tapes, which is kind of, you know, relaxation music. But I remember playing it and thinking, God, this is awful. People pay for this? I could do this.
Light bulb moment.
Yeah, and I had my studio and my equipment that I'd sort of built up. So I thought I'll have a go at this. And my wife, who sang as well, I got her to sing along with it, multi-track, so it sounded a bit like Enya actually. And we would go off to these shows. I would run the cassettes off the night before. There used to be these shops called Athena. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. Yes. Yeah.
And I was a bit naughty. I used to sort of buy like a picture from that, shrink it down and make it into a cassette cover, you know. So I print those off at the photocopiers. I run off my cassette tapes. And we would go to these mind, body and spirit shows to try and sell it. And the incredible thing was people loved them. And I would clear out all my tapes. And even people like, I remember my next door neighbor that used to hate my pop music. She used to say, I love this relaxation music, you know. And that kind of, then we were thinking there's something in this. And I then went to the next stepping stone. I contacted a company that did that kind of music. And I thought they might like me to do some behind the hypnotherapist. But then they wanted me to also do some music on its own as well. And that did really well. I did about 10 albums. And I remember when I first started off, an album would be £300, and that would be for a buyout. That was it. So I was thinking, okay, that's not quite enough money. And I wanted to do a bit of print broking as well, because I got some experience printing in the work that I'd kind of done. So I was in this sort of scenario where I was still kind of at work and I was still kind of doing the music. And the job that I worked with a company that we were doing I was doing quite well. It was a company called Z Card, and they were called Z Card because they still make them today. But they're a patented product. It's like with two credit cards together, and you pull them apart, and there's like a folded sheet. I'm sure you.
Oh yes, I know the one. Yeah. They're
called Z Cards, and I worked for this company, and I got some good money coming. I was the first one to get a $1 million order. There was like there was a called Too Good to Be True. It was like an ice cream, and I got them to put one of these things with a calorie counter sort of on the front of it, and that was kind of cool. And I remember sort of late at night just trying to think of all these ideas that I could sell to these companies. And one of the interesting ones, I managed to get a meeting with Evans Hunt Scott, and they were the agency for Tesco. So I remember sort of like, you know, a couple of nights before sort of thinking, you know, what would Tesco do? How would they go for something like this? And I came up with this, with a few ideas. One was that a lot of ladies, when they go to petrol stations, they like to go to supermarket ones because they feel a bit safer. Mm. So I thought we'd have a map of Britain when you open this up, and it would show you all the petrol stations for Tesco's or whatever. And then you could have some coupons and things like that. I thought, you know, they might go for that as an idea. And then I had this other idea. I thought, well, if you go shopping and you spend, say, £20, you'd open the sheet up, and inside you'd scan a barcode with £20 on it, and you scan another barcode with £40 or whatever. So the more you spent, they could like give you a reward for that. So it could be like, you know, really a loyalty card. And I thought, yeah, I think let's call it a loyalty card kind of thing. So I went ahead and I did this presentation to Tesco's and showed them the ideas, and they said, oh, thanks very much, we'll get back in touch. And Tesco's came back and to Z Card, where I was working at the time, and they said, we really love your idea of a loyalty card, and we'd like to trial it, but we need to basically have this other card that sort of fits into it somehow. And I was thinking, okay, so we had like this plastic band around it to fit the card in, and this sort of thing. And in the end, they came back and said, well, we love your idea, but we don't actually need your Z Card because we could do it all just on one card.
And is this where Club Card came from?
Yeah, and then what happened was that they went and trialed it. They gave us an opportunity to pitch for doing just the production of cards, but you know, we weren't in that business. We couldn't compete with these companies that produce millions of these cards. Yeah. And I think it was Brighton or Bournemouth, they did it at the trial, took off great, and then they put it through all their stores, and they became the number one #1 outlet, and then all the other stores followed with their loyalty cards as well. So it was interesting. My wife knew about it, but of course, you know, I got nothing. I didn't earn anything from it because it's just an idea at the end.
Yeah, you've sparked something in them.
Yeah. So, you know, from that, I was in this kind of job, and I was thinking, do you know what? I quite enjoyed going to blue chip companies. I went to quite a few of the big companies, which was quite fun to experience. I remember going to McDonald's. Their head office was like next to you had to go into an underground station to get to it or whatever. And I remember, like, with them selling this idea, I thought, you know, they'll go for all their drive-throughs and this sort of thing. And they just went for a little leaflet that basically showed you how to clean their Coke machine, because their staff didn't know how to clean the Coke machine out. They only ordered like 5,000 of these things. It's really, you never know what they were going to do. And at that time, my wife, she was pregnant, and this was our daughter Holly. And when she was born, we were in Stoke Mandeville Hospital. And unfortunately, Holly wasn't very well. I remember there was a phone call because her stomach was getting very, very big and kind of swelling up. And they were a bit concerned. They said, I think we need to do an emergency operation at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. So we all went over there, and unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. But the swelling is 1 in 10 of cystic fibrosis children get a thing called meconium ileus, which means that the baby poo gets stuck, you know. And that's what happened, and a bit of a bowel had sort of rotted, so she had to have this operation. And we were in hospital with her for five weeks while she had this operation. While I was there, the company that I worked for, they were getting really kind of frustrated. You know, when are you coming back to work, James? And they just expected me to be off for a few days, you know, while the baby was born. And they were suggesting that I commute from the hospital to work and this sort of thing. And I decided there and then, I made it easy for them because I'd worked with them for a few years. So I said, right, I'm just going to quit. I resigned, you know.
Yeah.
And I had a company car, so that went. So no company car. We'd sold our house, and we were going to get a place with my mum, but her house sale had fallen through. So we had no home, no job, no car, and I had a dog and a sick baby. And we went back home, living in my old bedroom.
Oh my goodness, full circle.
Yeah. So literally rock back. So the only way is up, you know. And what that did, what my baby did, was forced me to give up and be able to do my music full time, you know. And I did a bit of print broking. I'd done some work with the Z Card with a company called Swatch, the
watch company.
Yeah. And they were one of the first people to do texting, which sounds incredible now, but they come up with this idea that you could text somebody from one watch to another watch. But when you first text, you only could text numbers. You couldn't text letters. So, you know, if I sent they called it a beep up. So if I sent you a beep up, they didn't call it a text. If that had kept, we'd be beeping each other, you know.
Yeah.
But they would call it a beep up. So if I sent to you like 391, you wouldn't know what that meant. So you'd need a little code book, and that's what I produced, was these code books that would say, "Hello, how you doing?" kind of thing. And there was a lovely lady there called Heidi Bochman, and I rang up Heidi and I said to her, "Look, I produced a lot of these for you. Explained what happened to my baby and my situation." And I said, "It's up to you. If you carry on working with me, I'll use the same printers and so forth. It's up to you, basically." And she said, I love working with you, James. I'll give you the or Llewellyn. I wasn't known as Llewellyn then. I'd love to give you the work. So it was like that helped, along with doing these albums at sort of £300 a pop kind of thing. And I produced, I think, about 10, and then I needed to write under a different name, so the catalogue didn't look like they were all. I called myself James Harry because that was my middle name. And because my family tree goes back to the last native prince, Llewellyn,
which is amazing. Yeah.
You could say Llewellyn better than I can.
Llewellyn.
There you go. You see. And my mum came up with the idea, why don't you call yourself Llewellyn? You know, I think if Prince didn't exist, I would have called myself Prince or Prince Llewellyn. So I took that name and I did a lot more albums. And then I got signed to New World Music. And New World Music are one of the biggest producers of this relaxation kind of healing music. And I was lucky enough to get signed to that. And my money then went from £300 an album to £2,000 an album. And they would also do albums with me that I'd get royalties on. So that was really kind of cool. And I did a lot of music for them. And then I remember sitting down at the table once and having the invoice book. And this went sort of like for 4 years. I had a contract for 4 years. And I wrote out all the invoices, like every single month for 4 years. And I went, we're okay for 4 years. I'm a recording artist, you know. And in that time, I got, because I was with this label which was called New World Music, the chairman of the company was a guy called Neil Wergan. Very, very clever, successful businessman. And we developed a brilliant relationship. I ended up, even though I was an artist, I ended up being like the kind of A&R guy there. And Neil would always sort of send me stuff to say, what do you think of this? Should we release it or not release it? You know, which obviously caused a few problems with the other staff members that were working there. They felt I was like his long lost golden boy or something, you know. But we just built this fantastic rapport. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to develop this company in America. And he went and got some investment, some very, very big investment to go over there. But the bank caught him out by actually saying at the end of the day, we'd like Americans to run it because we don't think you've got the experience. And the whole point was he wanted to go to America, and he was furious at that.
I can imagine.
So he approached me and he said, would you like to start a new record company? And this was 2005. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So we together, with his experience, with my experience of the music, and obviously the relationship we've done, we developed Paradise Music in 2005. And that over time grew to be, an international, he got, after a couple of years, he then went to the States. He went to live in Florida, where he is still today. And I was running the UK and Europe, and he was running the US. And Paradise Music just grew to be one of the biggest producers of relaxation and healing music to this day. And one of the things that's really, really interesting for me as an artist, that I always felt that security of being with a record company, because you do, don't you? You sort of think, you know, like from all those years of wanting to be a pop star, if I get signed by Virgin, but get signed by EMI, they're going to take care of it all. And I never imagined that actually, if I had my own label, that I would do that job better, and I would earn more money from it. And it's a strange feeling, and I would never want to be with another label again, because staff are chopping and changing. They've got their own interests and so forth. So very much that taught me to be confident with having my own label and realizing and understanding the industry about how it kind of works, you know. That's really the exciting part for me, to have that independence, working with other musicians, developing the label. And we then found at one point, as I'm sure you remember, CD sales started falling.
Yeah,
and
downloads became the thing. Yeah.
And the shops where we used to sell our CDs, because of the Performing Rights Society, who they are there to help musicians, but they were then hitting the shops to pay for playing music live in their shops, which is how we sold the music. And a lot of the shopkeepers, they were like, well, we don't want to pay this. We don't want to pay this money, so we won't take the music. So we were going through this situation where shops weren't selling our music anymore, and that was our only outlets. CD sales were getting smaller and smaller, and there was this talk about downloads, you know, sort of taking over. And the problem with downloads is once somebody's downloaded it, that's kind of it, you know, a bit like a CD. So although my music's always been played, you know, again and again and again, it's like it's only played once from my point of view when somebody buys it, because I don't get any repeats. You know, people that are playing my music in their homes or therapy places or spas or anything like that. I didn't benefit from that. But then when this thing called streaming came along, which there's a lot of musicians who, when they're signed to record companies, they don't get very, very good deals. They might be on 15%, for example.
Yeah.
And the record companies are notorious for not even sort of accounting properly in this kind of thing. You just don't get enough streams, then you're not going to earn anything off it, which is why you hear about these artists all sort of complaining they don't earn very much money from it. Whereas my music as an artist is used again and again and again and again. There's all these spas and all these places, and people will go to bed with my music at night. And the interesting thing is that even though I've produced a lot of albums, I think over the years I've lost count. I've produced over 200 albums, I think, over the 30 years I've been doing it. There would be somebody that would just be into one particular album, and I remember saying to them, they go to bed with it every night. Would you like to hear my new album they've got? No, we like this. We put this on every night. They never get sick of it. Same with therapists. They have their, like, Reiki's a big area for my music. They will play the same album time and time and time again. Their clients like it. Don't you ever get sick of it? No, it's wonderful. I know when to move my hands into different positions and things. So of course, when streaming came along, and they're playing it again and again and again, I'm getting so many streams that, and the income that comes in from that, I'm like in the 1% of what recording artists are in the world, like these big artists are,
But that's what I love about your story. And it's so much of your story you've told now that I love, but in particular, the fact that you are prolifically successful, but very few people who listen, so prolifically to you will actually be aware of who Llewellyn is.
No, they don't know who I am. And you know, it's like because it does a particular job.
Yeah.
It's like if somebody says, give me a paracetamol or an aspirin, they go, here you are. They don't go, oh, it must, well, I suppose Aladdin's famous, but they don't go, oh, it must be Boots or whatever. Yeah. It's a paracetamol, and it does the job. And like with me, yes, they are going through and they're choosing, but it just happens to be my music that they like, but they're not interested in, it's not like I'm a pop star or put on the wall or anything like that. I just do the job. But I remember when I was at the record label New World Music, they told me it took about 5 albums that people would own before they suddenly went, they're all by the same guy, and then they would actively start seeking me out, But yeah, it took several hours. Imagine that with Elton John, sort of like people have got 5 albums before they go, oh, I obviously quite like this guy. I might buy his next album.
Exactly. And can I ask you a question there? Is any part of you, so the younger version of you that was, seeking being assigned to Virgin, having that recognition, is there a part of you that is disappointed that you haven't got that recognition, or is the self-satisfaction that you have made music work for you, is that enough?
It's a good question, because during the pandemic, there was this thing about how 80s music was coming back and all this kind of thing. I think The Weeknd had a track, didn't they, which was Blinding Lights or something, which was, and I think it's the most streamed ever kind of track. To me, I listened to that, I thought, well, that's got that kind of aha sort of, which is what I was programming back in the 80s. Now people are sampling that. And I kind of think, relating to your question, there is this part of me that was frustrated that I didn't become a pop star, because it was something that I felt I could have been, I could have had the opportunity, but it just didn't work out. Whether it's destiny that I went this other path, which is helping more people. Maybe if I'd become this pop star, I wouldn't have been able to cope. God knows what I would have ended up with. And today I would have just been somebody, if I went, look, I've got a new song, and you'd be like, no, just play your hit from the 80s and shut up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was this. So during the pandemic, what I did was I returned to doing that, and I did what I think I'm a better singer than listening back to the demos. I'm a better singer now because there's more voice control. I'm a better lyricist. I'm a producer now, and I can produce better songs. And I kind of had this, I don't know if it's a naive idea, but I kind of thought our generation is the first kind of generation that's kind of not gone to the stage of, you know, listening to Val Doonican and wanting to put slippers on. We still want to rock, and we've got the Rolling Stones who are still rocking. You know, it's not like suddenly loud music is, oh, turn it off.
Yeah.
You know, we like, in fact, the music that we want to turn off is probably the offensive rapping, you know, lyrics, and that's the sort of thing. And the kids want to own that, because the kids want to own something that the mum and dads don't like. You know, but there's this kind of weird blurring that we still like rock and pop music. So
totally agree.
So I kind of thought, with this, you know, unfinished business that I think you're relating to inside of me, that I didn't get that recognition. So I did that quite seriously. I recorded a lot of tracks, a lot of songs that I wrote. My voice gets compared a lot with George Michael because he was a big influence in the 80s. But I called myself, again, my surname, I changed my name, always using different names. And I found a very kind of spiritual, successful kind of name, which wasn't that successful. But anyway, it said it was spiritually successful, called Zada, Z-A-D-A. So I called myself James Zada. And I did it properly. I put it through a label, which was my own label, because I've got the distribution, which I have through my relaxation music. And I got PR companies, big PR companies that work with promoting and plugging. Spent a fortune on promoting, and I got feedback from even people like Radio 2, which was the station that I'm promoting, and they said, you know, James is a Radio 2 artist, but there's no hype, there's no reason to play him. Why would our listeners, you know, at the end of the day, you've got Ed Sheeran or you've got James Arder, they'd rather listen. And it's like I couldn't get that platform right, and I then
traction. Yeah,
I couldn't get it. And then I spoke with another PR company, which is he's known as Bishop, actually. You'll probably be watching this. Lovely guy, Keith Bishop. And he said, you know, you're missing something here. And I went, what's that? He goes, you're missing your story as Llewellyn. He says, that's extraordinary. You know, not James Arden. Maybe that's further down the line. But the fact of what you've achieved and your journey and where you've come from and what you do, that's what we need to concentrate on. And I also do painting in the same way that I do my music. I tend to sort of draw it from somewhere, like a kind of inspiration, you know. And since working with Keith and promoting it with the Llewellyn side of things, it's done really well. He got me the awareness in the Daily Mail, you know, newspaper, and lots of other opportunities that are coming up, you know, things which are leading to possible film scores and things like that. You know, it's great, you know. And I've also been working with Jeff Chegwin, who's Keith. Do you remember Keith Chegwin?
I do. Multicolour Swap Shop.
Yeah, he's got. I didn't know he had a twin brother.
I did, yes.
And also Jeff's sister, who sadly passed, is Janice Long. You know, he's got an incredibly talented son called Hugo. I'm just going to see a show in a couple of weeks' time, and it's like, your son's in this. He goes, oh yeah, you know, incredibly modest, gifted family, and so working with all these people as a result of what I was doing with the James Arder, I think I'm starting to come to terms with realizing that the life that I have now has suited me a lot better. And I think it's more becoming of me at my age to be a composer than it is maybe a pop star. But I don't know. There is still that part of me inside that feels a bit sad that I didn't get that recognition.
But you are, sorry, carry on.
I was going to go. However, I do have a record at the moment which I'm singing on with my wife, which is going around all the clubs, and it might be a club hit. It's a thing. It's called Magical Flame, and it's a bit like I've done with you know, with the Elton John, that they took some old ballads and they put together with Dua Lipa.
Oh yes, they're fantastic. Yeah.
So I've taken classic George Michael, Different Corner, with Cilla Black's Something Tells Me Something's Going to Happen Tonight, and I've put those together with this beat. And there's a guy called Cutmore. He's famous for working on Moves Like Jagger. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And he's produced it, and that's the record that's going around the clubs at the moment. We're hoping that might turn. And I've given that a different name. We call ourselves the Wax Club. I'm always putting my name on the different names, and it's like the Wax Club featuring James Zarda, you know, sort of on it. But I picked that George Michael track because when I sing, my voice sounds very much like George.
I'm going to have a listen to that, definitely. And what's really interesting is, you know, you're talking about the connection with the 1980s and there being a resurgence in interest of music from the 80s. And I think that was possibly even before the pandemic, because you had the likes of Bananarama, Spandau Ballet, you know, going out and doing, you know, summer gigs, etc. Well, my best friend in Wales, she is 54 now, and her 17-year-old son go around all the old. They've got to see The Cure recently, and I can't think who else off the top of my brain at the moment, but he is very much into the music from the 80s. And isn't it fantastic that, and exactly as you said, that rather than be embarrassed by, you know, our children being embarrassed by the music that we're now into versus what they're into, actually the two have segued together, and we have it in common.
That's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, even Harry Styles, I think his big record, As It Was, it's got that same, you know, as it was.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So it is interesting, isn't it?
Really interesting. Yeah, really, really interesting. So what do you think your dad would be saying to you now? You know, having encouraged you, as lots of parents do. There's a fantastic book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where the poor dad, who's actually the biological dad of the author, encouraged him to go down the normal route, school, university, proper job, versus the rich dad, which was a mentor that encouraged the chap to be entrepreneurial, to follow his creativity, to go and not necessarily follow somebody else's path, but to follow his own. What do you think your dad would say to you now?
Well, my dad was a product of his time. So, you know, there was slightly coming through like the nouveau riche at that time, which like builders that was suddenly, because I remember in the road that we lived in, there was a builder that bought a house property there. And all the other kind of neighbours didn't want to have anything to do with him. But my dad, because he'd come from working class, and this chap who was called Ray, he always said, you know, he loved that about my dad, that he was the only one that welcomed him. So, you know, there was that kind of working class kind of thing. Whenever I went with my dad anywhere, it would always be hello, Squire, and he would chat with anyone. And my wife says, I've got that. It's like if the gardener comes here, I'm talking to the gardener for an hour and I still pay him. You know, I just chat to anybody, you know, like a taxi driver or whatever. So I've got that from growing up with my dad. But my dad was very much about a product of that time, that he could only see what worked for him. Mm-hmm. And he was giving us that opportunity. He worked so hard. And part of that was to give his sons and his daughter as well, because I've got a sister, as you remember, you know, talking about introducing me to the music. And my brother, he wanted to just give us the best that he could. And I think his frustration was that you're just wasting it away. And I kind of felt that with my own daughter, I know she was battling with cystic fibrosis, and she's well today. She just got married, actually. She's 28.
Oh, wow.
And doing great, you know. And I think that with what I wanted to do with that was not put pressure on her and say, you know, look, I've done this for you. I think parents do that, you know. You don't realize how lucky you are, because, you know, they're born into it. They're not going to know any different. And probably they're not going to appreciate it. Like I can appreciate now, looking back on what my dad was trying to do, you know, and the frustration. But where I find my peace with my father is that, yes, he would be pleased with me, but he would say, you were very lucky it worked out for you. Mm-hmm. You're lucky it worked out for you. And my brother, who's a bit like my dad, he would say the same thing. Oh, you're lucky. To which I would probably reply, oh, did I find it in a cracker then, did I? You know, wasn't anything to do with my hard work. So there's that pull that's going on there. But I do know that my dad, his plans were that he was going to retire. He was going to move to North Wales in this cottage. They were going to do the cottage up in North Wales. He was going to move to Wales, And he wanted to write. He loved sort of Desmond Bagley books. I don't know if you remember him as a writer.
Vaguely.
Yeah, these kind of crime thrillers and things.
Yeah.
And he was going to write. He was going to write some books. How cool would have that been? So if you think about it, living in Wales, doing something creative, I think he would have looked at me and thought, "Wow, you're living the dream that I wanted." You know. And he loved music. Unfortunately, he would have been my biggest fan of my relaxation music, and he would have adored the songs that I would have done, because I remember he loved the Nolan sisters and country music, because Nolans were before they did they were country and western.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had, when they used to wear their pinky dresses and things, he had all of that, and Crystal Gale and Dolly Parton. He loved country music, and some of the songs that I did would have crossed over. He loves melody, and bless him, he fancied a Hammond organ. He rented this Hammond organ over Christmas time to play on it. He didn't get a go on it because I just hogged it all the time. So he was very supportive of the musical part, but I think he wanted in return for me to knuckle down and be all right, because all he wanted for me was to just have nice things in my life, to have a nice home and the comforts. And I have that, so I think he's pleased. I think he would have been upset if I was struggling and I didn't have nice things in my life. Then he would have been, "You're a bloody fool. I gave you a good start and you wasted it." That's what he would have said. That's all he wants. It's nothing about "I told you so." That's what you want for your children, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think you'd been mighty proud that actually you've plotted your own path. You followed, your passions, and you had belief that it was going to work out, basically. But in waiting for it to work out the way that you wanted it to, you went and utilized those other skills that you had around marketing and creating an idea and seeing it through. So I think your dad's probably, up there now, actually going, "Good on you, son. You did it." And I think that's something really, really special.
Nice. That's a nice idea. I mean, with the funny thing is, I remember when I went to do the advertising job, I remember I couldn't really see myself having the confidence to talk on the telephone. I remember when they were doing sort of training on the phone, the manager would be there, and I'd ring him up and I'd go, "Hello," and he'd be like, "Yes." Can I speak to the person who's in charge? "Oh yeah, can I speak to the person?" And it was like absolutely dreadful. I was thinking, I'm so nervous, I can't do this. But I think that period when I was working and doing that, which was about 4 years, that helped tremendously in later on when I was dealing with the chairman of the record company, being able to build a rapport over the telephone, being able to build those relationships, which even today, communicating with you now, that's all come from the confidence of being a salesperson, I think, and mixing with people. So if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have developed those skills.
Yeah, I've heard so many people say that actually sales training, when they were younger, is what has given them the success they have seen in later life, because it's been pivotal to creating that sense of confidence.
It's interesting as well, and also one of the things I found fascinating is that, like with blue chip company people that make decisions and people that maybe have smaller businesses, you'd think that the smaller businesses, the people would be more approachable, they'd be friendly, and yet that wasn't the case. I learned that people are people, and some of the nicest people, and this seems to be almost in the industry I'm in at the moment, the people who are kind of very successful and approachable, they're nice. Whereas the ones that are kind of got their insecurities and kind of jealousies, they're not.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating sort of comparison. Really.
Absolutely. So how can people reach out to you, Llewellyn? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
If they want to find out about my music, if you go Llewellyn on all the streaming channels like Spotify, platforms, I guess they call them nowadays. So if you're with Apple Music, you just look for Llewellyn, you'll find me. Deezer, if you're in America, Pandora. A lot of people like Spotify, so you can find my music on there. And it lists, almost everything that I've done on there. You can have a listen to it. If you want to find out some more information about me, I have got a website. There's it's called relaxationman.com, but I know there's some details you can find. My art is llewellynart.com, so you can go and see the paintings and things that I do. You might find that interesting. The pop star side, the failed pop star side. If you like something 80s with a bit of a George Michael vibe to it, jameszarda.com. You know, I'm also on Spotify and all the streaming platforms as James Zarda if you want something to boogie to. It's got soul and also some nice ballads and things as well.
And nobody needs to worry, because we'll have all those details in the show notes, so people don't have to remember the different names that you go by. It's all there in the show notes, so people can easily connect with you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I am just sorry that we only have, kind of 45 to 50 minutes for an episode, because I could have probably spoken to you all afternoon. But I know that our listeners will have loved hearing your story, and I know they'll enjoy listening to your music. And as a trained hypnotherapist myself, I use that in my business. I'm going to take a listen as well.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.